End of season woes. Happens every single time, if we're being honest. New season drops, the content is fresh, the story is interesting, everyone is happy, but during that last month, everything definitely starts to get a little stale, and people get bored. But it just feels different this time. And you might be saying to yourself, well, Joey, what do you mean? Seems pretty obvious, end of season means nothing much to do, and you're just bored. Play a different game and stop complaining. And I'll go ahead and stop you there because that's exactly what I've been doing, and you can go check out my second channel if you want to see some of the variety content I'm going to be putting out. Back on topic though, things just feel a little different this time. Whereas previously a season got boring towards the end and I was hopeful that the next would be better, I just don't have that same sense of hope anymore. This Witch Queen era has been fairly lackluster for me to say the least. Witch Queen was a good DLC all things considered, but every season following up that expansion has all just meshed into one big nothing burger for me. And what I mean by this is I can't really look back at the seasons we've had thus far and point out key things that made those seasons really special and enjoyable for me. Looking back at Beyond Light, for example, Hunt was a terrible season. I think we can all agree on that, but the return of Hawkmoon via the Harbinger mission was super hype and very monumental. For Chosen, that's whenever the seasonal narrative finally found its footing, and we got Presage as a mission which rivals that of Whisper of the Worm and Zero Hour. For Splicer, we got the incredibly beautiful and iconic Vex network, and the addition of Transmog, which has forever changed the fashion game for Destiny 2, and not to mention the first ever remastered raid in Vault of Glass. And with Lost, we got the Shattered Realm, which was a greatly crafted seasonal open world with plenty of secrets and lore to discover, not even mentioning the free 30th anniversary update that followed with Dares of Eternity and all the cool free loot that were callbacks to the old Bungie games. Now fast forward to Witch Queen. For Season of Risen, we got PsyOps Battlegrounds and Vox Obscura. While both are cool, PsyOps are just strikes that take place in recycled locations, and Vox Obscura is an exotic mission that takes place in a recycled location. Speaking of recycled location, let's move to Season of the Haunted, which had its entire premise set on the Leviathan coming back. Pretty cool, right? Well, not exactly. This season had people mindlessly grinding out RNG chest spawns for red borders of old sunset weapons we used to already have, and instead of actually remastering the fan favorite raid itself, Bungie instead opted to have players do story missions in the underbelly and base the entire seasonal activity off of a public event in the Castellum. I'm also not going to count Duality here, as that was an entirely separate purchase, but if you do want me to count Duality, Duality is a dungeon that to this day still has its core mechanic bugged and continues to cause wipes and ruin solo flawless runs, despite Bungie claiming to have fixed it. Now, here we are in Plunder, and I will admit, Plunder on the surface does seem to have a good amount of content. We have Ketchcrash, which in my opinion is one of the best 6-man activities we've ever seen for seasonal content. We also have Expeditions, our usual story beats, as well as Hideouts, which are just Wrathborn hunts, which take place in reskin lost sectors from planets that are no longer in the game. No, I'm actually serious for that last bit, it's super weird. Here's the thing though. While Ketchcrash is a fun activity, Bungie for some reason has put such an emphasis on running expeditions instead, which at their core literally boils down to the worst part of the Vow of the Disciple raid, sitting on top of a barge, being brain dead, and shooting enemies that don't pose a threat. Outside of this, we got King's Fall, which I will give Bungie this, is a fantastic remaster, and they did a much better job than I was anticipating. Here's the problem. Unlike Season of Splicer, this is not Bungie's first rodeo with releasing a raid with an alternative difficulty. In fact, it's been well over a year since feedback on how to handle master raids going forward. And while they've acknowledged that they'll be making changes for Lightfall, I assume they don't value this area of the game as much as others, as King's Fall launched and joined the past 2 other raids as an activity with a master mode not worth doing unless you want purple letters under your name in the form of the raid seal. And this absolutely blows for hardcore players that are looking for something to sink their time into. Raids nowadays, thanks to Witch Queen, have just boiled down to getting 5 red borders for your weapons, mindlessly leveling them up at 𝗫𝗄𝗎, and then never touching the raid again because what's the point? And that absolutely sucks. Hell, I sound like an absolute whiny child sitting here talking about the woes with PvE in these seasons, but what about PvP? These guys are dealing with quite possibly the worst metas I've ever imagined in franchise history, and when Bungie attempts to make things right and tweak the sandbox to alleviate how broken things are, they can't even do that right. The PvP side of things has been starving for what seems like ages, and Bungie continues to make even dumber decisions, like removing core loot incentives like the 𝗕𝗵𝗡 and 𝗔𝗗𝗩𝗔𝗡 from PvP loot pools, as well as limiting Iron Banner to only coming around twice a season, to make things seem even worse, only to FOMO people into playing the event because they only get 2 weeks out of the season or they're screwed. What exactly is the point of this video? In truth, I'm not sure. As someone who's been around and following the game since before the release of Destiny 1's alpha, never have I ever been this confused and worried about the direction that Bungie's taking the game in. I guess you could count Destiny 2 vanilla, but I choose to attribute that to Activision's own doing more so than Bungie's. There's a quote from Joe Blackburn during the 𝗨𝗏 reveal that continues to make the rounds over on social media in times like this.
We're long past the era of content droughts.
And statements like that just sorta worry me, because yeah, while Joe is technically correct in that Destiny does have plenty of content to go around each season, how much of that content is replayable and actually worth sinking time into? The game has simply boiled down to logging in, listening to 5 minutes of dialogue for a story that frankly, I don't give a shit about, only to load into a seasonal playlist to grind out my 5 red border weapons, unlock the patterns, and never touch that content again. All of this feels terrible when we also get news that Bungie isn't big on making more content that rivals that of Presage, Whisper, or Zero Hour because of the resource cost that requires to pull off that level of content to begin with, like encrypting it to keep it secret. Does this mean that we'll never get those missions ever again? No, but it sure as hell doesn't shine any light on hope for the future of those missions coming to fruition either. While on the topic I feel we'll never see again, true community events which involve everyone coming together to solve this huge mystery and puzzle as a collective seem to be a thing of the past too. One of Destiny's strongest traits has always been its mystery and its ability to invoke players into coming together as one to solve what seems like an impossible task. This as of late has only been outlined by the recent Telesto quote-unquote event that in the end was just a means for Bungie to poke fun at their own game's spaghetti code and to drive merch sales on Twitter. Any actual event that can be found in the game's code seems to just be one that involves the community running activities that we've been running for months now, with the end goal in sight being mediocre cosmetics that 99% of players won't care about. With all that said, I'm not quitting Destiny 2. I'm just Burnout, and unfortunately more worried about its future than I am hopeful. I love this game franchise more than anything out there on the market. If I didn't, I wouldn't be sitting here making this video and putting my thoughts out there. So I'm always going to be around to give my feedback and help in any way I can with the community, kind of like how I do with teaching new players about the loot that this game has to offer. This will probably be my last upload before the new season. I kind of just wanted to get something out there so I don't just go dark, and sort of give you all an idea on where I am as far as Destiny goes and what I'll be doing here on YouTube. Which for the time being, I'll be focusing my efforts on my second channel just as a bit of a creative outlet so I'm not bored out of my mind, with an occasional live stream on this channel if I can bring myself to play the game when Iron Banner comes out. Anyways guys, thank you all so much for watching. Massive shout out to all my Patreon supporters and YouTube members that you see here on screen. And I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.